Welcome to the All About You podcast. So, I have a question for you. Have you ever thought about living in a home that is not traditional? Well, today my guest is Nikki, and she lives with her husband in a cave dwelling. Nikki, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sheila. Thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I have never been in a cave dwelling. I don't really know anything about it, so I'm really interested to know what life is like. So let's start at the beginning then, Nikki. So, Nikki, whereabouts are you in Spain?
I'm in Galera in the very north of the province of Granada in Andalusia, so the south of Spain. And although it's the province of Granada, it's an hour and a half northeast of Granada capital, or, Granada that everybody knows as the Alhambra and the famous things that it's famous for.
So, you are originally from the UK, but you're now living full time in Spain.
Yes, I came to Spain from Essex, where I'd been since I was 9, from Braintree in Essex.
Nikki, one of the questions I wanted to ask, you're the only person I've ever met who is living in a cave dwelling. Now, presumably prior to this, you lived in traditional styles of homes and housing?
Yeah, so what's really interesting is that Mark, my husband, and I have always gone for modern new builds. So we've never even been country cottage people. We've had 3 houses in England since 1991, and they were always new builds, and that was the style we liked. And a cave is basically the absolute opposite of that, and is very country cottagey and quirky, and you end up in fact decorating and doing things such that it's almost tacky because you seem to have this free license to in this strange unusual dwelling.
What makes a couple originally from the UK move to Spain and then buy a cave dwelling?
I think the biggest thing for us was the option to retire 20 years early or earlier than we would have done had we stayed living and working in the UK. That was the main thing. That was a suggestion by my sister, and she said, have you thought of buying a cave house and living in inland Spain, sort of sharing a car, selling everything in England, but perhaps getting a flat or two and living off the rental income. And then that way you can retire 20 years earlier in our case than you would have done had we stayed in England. And I think actually with the cost of living crisis and COVID and everything, we would have had to work even longer than we'd originally thought.
I mean, that is an amazing achievement to retire 20 years earlier. So
Yeah,
many people only dream of that, but you have actually done it. And
yeah,
that was made possible because you sold up everything in the UK and moved over to Spain.
yeah.
And originally you were going to rent out a flat and live on the income, but now you're in
Yes,
a cave dwelling.
yes. Well, no, what we were actually, I probably should make that clearer. We sold our house in England, and with 2/3 of the proceeds bought 2 flats in England where we used to live. And then they are rented out permanently to a single tenant in each flat. And the rental income from those flats pay for us to live in Spain. Because we're below retirement age, we needed an income, the UK pounds, if you like, from those 2 flats pay for us to live in Spain.
When you came to Spain, did you have any ideas about living in a cave dwelling?
Yes and no. So what made us come was that my sister, well, probably 15 years previously, had seen on a program, Place in the Sun, a couple that had bought a cave house in Galera, where we live. She and her husband thought it was interesting, and it had always been in the back of their mind. So 10 years on from the program, they came and rented a cave house in Galera, and they loved it. So then a bit later on, they bought one to use as a holiday home with a long-term plan of perhaps moving over permanently. And what happened with us was about 8 years ago, my sister had constantly been saying, "Oh, come and see our holiday home, our holiday cave house." So eventually we found a little gap in our holiday allocation at work, and we came at Christmas because we had both had Christmas shutdown. So we thought, oh yes, we can come over for a couple of days. And we came over to visit my sister and her husband in their holiday cave house in Galera. So we arrived Christmas night, almost bedtime, and the next morning we went on a walk, and that's when she said, what mortgage have you got left on your property in the UK? Had you thought that, you could both potentially retire early? And she knew that I loved work, but equally the option to be able to choose when you retire rather than be forced. She said, well, you could do that. So we crudely, well, we were surprised, and we crudely worked out the figures on a calculator based on what we were told was the cost of living here and what we knew we should be able to get for our property in Essex. Then we just quickly viewed something not too expensive. We weren't sure we would like it, and we found a cave house that we liked and then put in an offer. So it just happened like that. And we'd only spent 2 full days really in the village where we now live permanently, because we'd just got 3 nights here, and then we were off to Granada for a couple of nights and then off back to England. So it was done completely as a moment of madness, completely on a whim. And ironically, the first cave house, we're now in our second cave house. The first one was called El Capricho, which means whim in Spanish. Totally out of character, because we are both really very steady people that, we like to make sure we've got a job, everything paid for. We want to, have a sensible mortgage, all of those things. I had never wanted to live abroad ever, and I certainly didn't want to live in a hot country. My husband had always wanted to live abroad, so this was a no-brainer for him. Yeah, it was just completely crazy, out of character, done without any thought, whereas usually I research everything to the nth degree, and here we are.
Well, thankfully, it was the right decision for both of you, and you're now in your second cave home. We've talked about the transition then from the UK over to Spain, totally against everything that you had both thought what your future path would be.
Yeah.
I mean, that is absolutely an amazing story. What is the process of buying a cave home? I mean, can you just go into estate agent and say, okay, I want to buy a cave home? I mean, I'm sure a lot of them would look at you blankly to start with, but is it an easy process to buy a cave home?
Yes, it's an incredibly easy process. It's a risky process because there are good and bad caves in terms of dampness, the type of rock, and that sort of thing. But process-wise, for us, I think something else that probably made it easy for us to make the decision, although we're only in a little Spanish village of 1,100 people, the estate agents in the village is run by an English couple, and he's actually from Chelmsford and his wife is from Billericay. So they were both Essex people, and a lot of people had said, that they had a lot of faith in Sean from Spanish Inland Properties, where we bought. And so we sort of were very happy with that. And I mean, it's so naive because we didn't even look at any other agents. We just looked to see what properties Sean had, what would be in our budget. And I'll tell you that because I think that that's really interesting and important. Our first cave we bought for the equivalent, because the exchange rate was pretty good then. It was, I think, €1.26 to the pound. We bought for £46,000. I think that sort of sets it a clear picture as to how we could afford to do it, because even lots of Spanish people say, oh, you're very young to be retired, how is that possible? And we're not rude, so we don't say, well, that's because it's really cheap here. We just say, well, where we came from, we lived an hour outside of London. It's really expensive to live an hour outside of London, and we've not bought an hour outside of Madrid. We've bought in Andalusia, inland, an hour and a half from the nearest coast, and we've bought a cave house, which are cheap generally because they had a bit of a stigma in the village and around. It was the poor people many years ago that lived in caves. So it's only now that foreigners are coming along and buying caves that other people, including Spanish people, are thinking, oh gosh, these foreigners come, they buy a cave, they do more than just have a Belfast sink in it. This is quite interesting. So that they are going up in value, but the buying process was so easy. We put in the offer, the first offer was rejected, toing and froing a bit, and actually the owners of the first cave that we bought were in Thailand. They didn't live here permanently. Agreed on something, and then a contract is drawn up. You have to give a 10% non-refundable deposit. As soon as that's in, it's yours, and pretty much everything is really quick there on in. You can have a survey, which we sort of had a basic survey, but I think probably not, they're not really worth the paper they're written on. It's not the same as in England, and you just don't know. I mean, they're pretty strong, touch wood, caves. The process then is that for us as foreigners, we had to fly over when on completion, which was a couple of months later. We had to fly over a couple of days in advance, a couple of working days in advance to get our Spanish tax identification number, our NIE, for those who know. And then once we'd got that, in parallel, we had given the estate agent power of attorney to open us a Spanish bank account, and that had been done sort of in the background. And then with those two things combined, we went to the notary and we met the other couple we were buying from. Everything was explained in English, and then that was it, sale done. Transfer, we had a check written out by the bank, and we transferred the money, obviously from England to Spain, to be in the Spanish bank account. And that was it. So sort of from when we had our offer accepted, it was literally just over 2 months to completion.
I mean, that's an incredible story. Buying a property is just generally one of the most stressful things you go through. Let's talk about the practical side of things. So you bought the property from somebody else. So they obviously had got the water, the electricity all sorted out.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that works exactly the same as a normal property. You're on the standard grid for that type of stuff.
Yes. So that cave was in the village, or high up in the village. And yes, we had internet, which was actually better, even in the cave part, not just outside, better than many places in England then and even now. And water, the water actually unusually is run by our local town hall. So it's not a water company, it's the town hall that do that. Electric, there's no central heating generally in caves. So our only form of heating was and is a wood burning stove. Just does it perfectly. And cooling wise, one of the reasons people move to caves is because they maintain more or less a constant temperature all year round. You don't ever need cooling, or you rarely need cooling. You might be more comfortable with a little bit of a fan occasionally, but generally not. Generally, they're sort of 19 degrees all year round.
I mean, that's incredible, because as soon as you talk to somebody to say you live in Spain, the first thing is, oh, I can't cope with the high temperatures, or do you ever wear a coat? Does it ever rain? So you and I have been in Spain for quite some time now, so we actually know what it's like. But to have a property where you've got this constant temperature is incredible, and probably one of the number one reasons people get excited about cave dwellings.
Yes, definitely. I mean, we're high up in the hills here, so our cave is at 860 meters. So it can, I mean, it's rare, but through winter, there might be a couple of days in a winter, not every winter, where it goes to -10 overnight. But that's quite unusual. But definitely in the minuses through winter. So we have that. And then in summer, as a peak, but again, not common, it can go up to 50 degrees. So it's really, there really are two extremes, and yet the cave maintains more or less, constant temperature throughout.
Nikki, let's talk about the structure now. So how many rooms do you have in your cave? Do you call them rooms?
Well, what happened? We were in the first cave, and then we saw the opportunity to get a bit more outside space, because that was our one compromise. The first cave ticked every box, but didn't have the outside space that we wanted. And outside space is a bit rare on caves, because if you think they're a dwelling on the side of a hill going to be much outside space, and you don't have a back garden. Our compromise on the first cave was outside space. So when we saw the opportunity, when we realized that we loved it here and we were going to stay, and we thought, well, actually, we can probably get some more money released to move to another cave, we found there was another cave with outside space, considerable outside space, actually more than we needed, and a carport. So the two things combined, and we just bought a new car. So that seemed a nice compromise, if you like. So sorry, I've just remembered. What was the last part of the question?
What is the actual living space? How many rooms have you got? Do you even call them rooms?
Yeah, they are. Our first cave had an upstairs and a downstairs with several rooms. The second cave is more or less the same space, but is all on one level. So it's essentially a bungalow. It doesn't look like a bungalow, but we have 4 double bedrooms and then a huge amount of open plan living. A modest kitchen. Kitchens are generally not huge in caves, but a kitchen with microwave, dishwasher, big sink and drainer, oven, hob, extractor, pantry. So, it's got everything that we need. But rooms wise, we've got what's the equivalent of 4 double bedrooms. But because you don't have generally shed storage and things like that in a cave, one of them we use as storage for suitcase. You don't have a loft either. One of them we use as suitcases, food, wine, those sorts of things. And then another one, actually the one I'm in now talking to you from, is what we use as an office with just a desk, some other bits in this room. But we have 1 bedroom, double bedroom for us, and a double bedroom for guests.
Well, wow. I mean, it sounds incredibly spacious.
So yeah, it's 124 meters squared of built space. So we've got the 4 double bedrooms, and then we have a seating area for watching TV, so like a normal size big sofa and television. Got a separate area with a dining table and chairs for 6, and then another seating area where we can sit 2 to 4 people. So plenty of space. And because it's open plan, you've got all the lights from the front that comes through. So some people have put off caves because many of them, and it's true, just consist of a front door and a small window, and then you walk in and you go back and back and back and back, and so there's not much natural light. Both times we've gone for caves that are more horizontal or landscape, if you like, so that there are lots of windows along the front that all let natural light in, and then the cave room actually only goes back 1 room, so it doesn't go back and back and back.
I mean, when you say to people you live in a cave dwelling, rather like when you and I had this conversation, I mean,
Yeah.
people must just sort of say, sorry, I heard that wrong. You live where? The only person I've ever met that lives in a cave dwelling. I think it's fascinating. What is the general reaction you get from people?
It was much like you said at the beginning, when you said about moving to Spain. When we sort of said to people, "Oh, we've got some news, we're moving to Spain," we had to say, "Look, now before you say anything, I'm sure you're all imagining a villa, because it's not like that." But many people said, "Oh, a cave house," and they couldn't get their heads around it. And after we'd moved, one friend actually said, "Oh, you're living in a cave. I thought you said you were living near a cave." And then I think what's really funny is because most of our friends, or a lot of our friends, live in cave houses, when we talk, we just say, "Oh, yeah, yesterday I was at my friend's cave and I did this and I did that." And it's just natural to us. Whereas for other people, they say, "Sorry, what did you say? Where were you yesterday?" Because we never say, "Oh, I was at my friend's house." We just don't. We just always say, "I was at my friend's cave," or "the cave this, the cave that."
Do you think this will be your forever home in the current cave you're in?
Now, I'm not sure because we love the cave and we love the village, but there can be some maintenance with the cave. It is a living thing. There's quite a bit of maintenance. Although, having said that, quite a lot of people I speak to in houses in Spain and also friends back in England, friends and family, they're all talking about the maintenance of just houses. maybe that's not the case. So I don't know, because we absolutely love the village and we can't see ourselves elsewhere. But then we don't know if perhaps in older age, if we might want to be closer to other facilities, to walk down a hill to get to the centre of the village. But we can get everything here. So it's difficult, because the other thing, like you said, in Spain, heating and cooling is quite a big deal. And we don't ever have that problem. We're comfortable all year round. I think it might be a bit foolhardy, but the answer is I don't know at the moment. But certainly for the moment, we're not going anywhere, and we just love it.
I think it's absolutely fascinating that you are living in a cave dwelling. And I love the way you say, oh, I'm going to my friend's cave. I think I'm going to adopt that, because that is just so brilliant.
Yeah.
Nikki, thank you so much for telling us all about your story of moving from the UK, the reasons behind it, and how you managed to retire 20 years earlier. I think a lot of people will be very, very jealous of that. Nikki, thank you so much for being a guest on the All About You podcast.
You're very welcome.
So thank you for listening to our conversation. I do hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you would think about living in a cave dwelling. So if you'd like to subscribe for future episodes, it is free. And if you have a story to tell, please contact me on allaboutyoupodcast@yahoo.com and let's tell your story.